and welcome everyone. I'm really pleased to see lots of familiar faces, some new faces as well. And I know we have some folks from the community joining us, as well as our law students. So welcome. This is a great program. This whole series, Exploring Careers in the Law, is such a great opportunity to kind of get exposure into a very specific substantive area of law. By the way, for those that don't know me, I'm the campus dean at San Luis Obispo College of Law. So I am here in my law school office right now, and happy to be with you tonight. So this is a kind of a deep dive into consumer law. And, you know, as a law student, one of the things that is wonderful about law school, and can also be a little bit daunting, is that part of your education is kind of figuring out, well, what interests you? What direction do I want to go in when I get this degree that I'm working so hard towards? So we hope that we'll shed a little bit of light on what consumer law is, and then also if it interests you, if you hear something that is interesting to you. First of all, that you'll have met a couple of practitioners that I'm sure would be open to speaking with you further, but also you can get a sense of, how do I get from point A to point B, right? How do I go from law student to an attorney doing consumer law? So with that, we have two professors here from San Luis Obispo College of Law who also practice consumer law. And so they are our panelists tonight. We have Professor Matt Loker and Professor Elizabeth Wagner with us tonight. And what I'm going to do format-wise is I'm going to just toss out the first question to the panel. And as part of that question, they will introduce themselves. So they are going to take over here, and we will leave plenty of time at the end for questions. So Professor Wagner, can you just introduce yourself and tell us about the job that you do, the legal job that you do right now, and explain about, substantively, what does that look like? What does your day-to-day look like?
Okay. Well, nice to see everybody. My name is Elizabeth Wagner, Professor Wagner, I suppose, to some of you. I am in my 5th year of practice, and I practice exclusively in consumer protection. I focus with credit reporting and issues with identity theft that can arise. A huge part of my day-to-day is like today I took a deposition and then spent the second half of the day going through documents that were produced by various defendants in a case. So every day is a different thing, but often within this area of the law, we are very much litigators in that we go in court. We have depositions. We can go to trial when, when it comes up and when they let us go in person. Then we have all of the other things too, where we are dealing with huge entities like credit bureaus and banks. So we do have to spend some time in discovery, going through documents and engaging in that sort of side of things as well. So what I do is definitely probably a nice split between having my nice calm office days and then being more on my feet and deposing witnesses or having court appearances.
Thank you, Professor. So, Professor Wagner, so are you representing plaintiffs then? Are you representing the individuals who are the ones that are struggling, right? They're the ones that are challenged by something and they need help.
Yes. So I represent individual people against big companies. I like to say we represent the underdogs or the little people and go up against the man. So yeah, we are bringing lawsuits against corporations and business entities on behalf of a single person. Sometimes we do class actions, but that's not something I particularly enjoy doing. So I mostly focus on just a single person lawsuit against a company.
Great, thank you. Professor Loker, same question for you. Just introduce yourself and tell us what your day-to-day is like and how it might be different from Professor Wagner's.
Exactly. Yeah. So I'm Matt Loker, and I know pretty much all of you. So Elizabeth and I, we have pretty much the same days because, we work together outside of the law school. So just to piggyback on what Elizabeth said is, what we're doing on a day-to-day basis is, going up against these multi-billion-dollar companies who do not want us to delve into their records. So when we're going through these documents, like we're trying to find what's missing and, what don't they want us to see? Because our job is to present the case to the jury, the judge and the jury, the story of what happened. So we're dealing with these inaccurate credit information. We're also dealing with identity theft claims. A big portion of our practice focus on that. So it's a twofold, thing there where, we have to gather our clients' information when they're all first-time litigants. They don't necessarily know what they need to put together in order to effectively tell their story and present their damages case. So we're, pulling that out of them and working with them in a very therapeutic way. We're going into very personal stuff of their damages, a lot of stuff they might go to and speak with a therapist about. We need them to give us that so we can effectively advocate for them. So that's one hat that we're wearing. And on the other side, we're their voice against the defendant, where, again, they're these large, like multinational corporations, and we need to, advocate for them against someone who really just didn't pay attention to them until we brought this case in federal court, which is a whole different, beast entirely. So, down the road from the law school, we have our state court, where they can hear any case or controversy. You go into state court, you might have 50 cases on the docket. You go down to federal court, which is LA, Orange County, San Francisco, and there's only a couple of those. You might be only one. So, it's a very formal setting in how we're presenting those cases and doing our oral argument and the jury trials. So it's, just similar to what Elizabeth is doing. We're doing the exact same cases together and really tag teaming, and I think doing it quite effectively.
Awesome. So Professor Loker, I have a couple questions just to follow up on that. So you're practicing in federal court because you're alleging violation of federal crimes.
Exactly.
Right? Okay. Or federal, is it crimes or is it, what is it? Is it a civil? It's a civil.
Yeah, we're on the civil side.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
But there are crimes that can overlap. So that's what's kind of fun for me. I always wanted to be a secret agent. So, sometimes we'll be involved with the DOJ, or maybe I am a secret agent. I don't know. The FBI can get involved when they're going after some fraud rings. So it's exciting to talk to them, though it does kind of stop your heart when the FBI is calling. And it's like, oh, that can't be good, but usually.
Yeah. And some of what you said is really kind of similar to what I know from the employment law side, from plaintiff side employment work, where we would be sometimes in state court and sometimes in federal court. And so wondering, do you work on a contingency basis? And if you do, can you explain to our audience what that means?
Yeah, absolutely. So there's a couple of ways that attorneys can get paid. So they're one way is an hourly basis, where you're doing the work for your client at an agreed upon hourly rate within your retainer. And then you send them a bill at every step of the way, usually like every month or so. But what Elizabeth and I do is we're on a contingency. And what that means is that at the end of the case, whether the end is a settlement or post-trial motions, appellate briefs, those sorts of things, whatever pool of money there is, we're splitting out with our client. And we do a 55-45 contingency. Our costs come out of our client's ends. So what that means for our client is that they came to us with a problem. Fixing that problem does not require them to write us a check at any time. They don't pay our fees, they don't pay our costs. We front those costs. Then when we win, we all win together. So there's one big pot of money. We'll call it $1 million because we like those. And we'll split that with our client with the cost coming out of their end. So I just feel that we can effectively advocate and litigate for our client without them having to be concerned about the cost. We go forward.
And I assume there's a public policy reason for that, right? Because you mentioned that you're going up against big businesses, sometimes $1 million, $1 billion businesses. So the public policy behind that is if you couldn't bring your case to an attorney on a contingency basis, you wouldn't be able to bring your case. You wouldn't have your day in court, right? So it makes it possible to have your day in court. Is it similar to employment law, Professor Wagner, where if you can't resolve the issue, you can't resolve the problem for the client, you don't get a recovery? Your client doesn't owe you anything? Do you have those situations?
So that's actually pulls up a very interesting point. Often at a certain point in a case, we will get served with what's called a Rule 68, offer of judgment in federal court. And I forget what the equivalent is. California has an equivalent as well. 998, yes. And what that is if we don't settle for that amount in that offer and we proceed and we don't get a better result, then we are on the hook, or our client is technically supposed to be on the hook for paying defense costs. As a firm, because we want to be consumer friendly and we want to encourage our clients to have their day in court, we swallow that cost. So we tell our clients, yeah, we have this offer on the table. If we don't beat $10,000 at trial, we're on the hook for their costs, but we're going to take that chance because we believe in this case. And this is a David Goliath situation. So if the defense attorneys, they think it's a coercive effect. And so we try to do that to neutralize the threat a little bit. But if we do go to trial and we lose, there is a chance they get no relief.
Yep.
But that doesn't happen very often.
Yeah,
right.
because,
And that,
oh, sorry.
I was just going to say, that's the importance of the intake process, right?
Yes.
You want to explain what that means, Matt?
No, exactly. So, and that's exactly my point. So, on the plaintiff side, we pick and choose, the consumers that we want to work with. So if we get an intake, either myself or Elizabeth would talk to that person, get a sense of who they are, how they might present, all in addition to their legal claims. Because as a business, if we go forward and lose, then, we might be out, just $20,000 in costs alone. So we get to pick and choose that. And usually our gut's pretty correct. I've been practicing for 12 years. Elizabeth and I have been together for, all of her career as well. So we've been doing a lot of cases. So, you just get a sense as you're talking to people if it's going to be a winner or not. So we don't, obviously, like, things happen and, sometimes you lose, but it's a very low percentage. Consider the flip side where you have a corporate defendant and you just have to take every single case that comes through the door on behalf of that client. You have to defend them. We don't have that. So I feel like we can really be in the driver's seat and really bring home like the cases that deserve the time.
Absolutely. Okay, I'm going to make a note for myself because I have another question that I might bring up later if we have time. So I'm going to move to the next question, which is we can go back in time a little bit to each of your careers and the beginning of your careers, and just summarize what was your pathway from law school to what you're doing now. Not everybody takes a linear path. And sometimes the longer you're in practice, the more twists and turns it takes. And sometimes it is a linear path. So Professor Loker, why don't you start with this one?
Yeah, mine was interesting. So Elizabeth and I were at the same firm, Casaroni Law Group, back in the day. And when I was in law school, one of the owners, Abbas Casaronian, came and spoke at our law school for our symposium for the Entertainment and Sports Law Society. At the time, I was president of that, as well as president of the ADR group, which I forget what they called it. But anyway, so Abbas was there and he was doing a presentation. And I liked what he was saying. He presented a very compelling story in furtherance of his firm, which at the time was dealing with more like entertainment / anything they could find on Craigslist. So they wanted to be an entertainment law firm, but they're too new. So they specialize in anything that walk through the door. So, during the symposium break, I sat next to him, started interning for him during my first year of law school. And then the firm, we noticed when I started practicing is that we were getting all these phone calls for consumer related issues. And I go, this is annoying. I don't know why all these people are calling us. We don't do that. And eventually we kept getting those calls with no advertisement costs. And I go, okay, well, maybe we should look into this. So then we slowly shifted over to, working with consumers against debt collectors, which is a niche in itself. And we got to this niche of doing credit reporting and identity theft. And to me, just like academically, it was very interesting. And we're trying to figure out the fraud and going up against like the bigger corporations. So it started off as one thing completely different, working with theater actors and those sorts of things. And just got to, it's a natural transition to the consumer practice.
Super interesting. I'll have you answer that question, Professor Wagner, because, so that was at that firm, but then at some point you went out on your own.
Exactly. Right before the world shut down.
Okay, so tell us that part of the story. That sounds like the good part.
Yeah, so it's, we started Loker Law in December 2019. Really like a big push for that was, personal, and Elizabeth and I, like, being at that firm and seeing the path they were taking, and we just wanted to go a different route. High value cases, low volume. And, at the old firm, like, we were doing so much, like, it was everything, too many cases, too many areas of the law. And we're like, this is like, we realized with like the credit reporting and the identity theft, like there was a massive need for practitioners that focus on that. And we just built the business around those two main violations, two main issues.
So pretty recent, and also at a really challenging time.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
And you're in a successful practice now, right? So it's like just, with that perseverance, and you're doing well. Professor Wagner, what's your journey been?
So my journey has been a little bit different. I went to law school and I was very convinced I was going to be a criminal prosecutor. And all of my internships in law school were geared towards that. But those government jobs are very competitive out of law school. And I didn't get hired, simply stated. So then I started looking for other avenues I could pursue. And that's when I came across this consumer protection law firm. And Abbas Kazarunian was an alum from my law school. And I was like, this is kind of like prosecuting. We're still suing and going after people. So it's kind of adjacent. And I interviewed and I loved it. And I was hired as a law clerk for a post-par position. And they paired me with Matt because we're both from the Midwest and they thought we'd get along. And here we are. And then that was just great. He was my mentor, and that was wonderful. And then it did come to the point where we had to split paths for a little while. And I spent about 2.5 years in lemon law. So I took a federal court vacation and went to state court. So I can speak very clearly on the differences in those two. And then also got some trial experience. And then after Matt launched his solo firm, he asked for me to come join him. So I had the choice between staying in Orange County or coming up to SLO. And it was honestly a personal life choice decision. I'd known Matt for so long. My biggest thing is my law career has been about following my gut. Mm-hmm. If something feels right, then follow it. And, I've pulled on that thread in the different directions it's taken me, and it's treated me really well.
Yeah. And isn't it interesting? I do think that some doors close for you outside of your control, and it just causes others to open. So the thing about going after those highly sought after government jobs is that you're also at the whim of hiring freezes, right? I mean, if there's legislative budgetary issues, then, I know people who graduated my year from law school who really wanted to be public defenders, and there was just hiring freeze. You could not get hired by a big public defender's office in LA, for example. So, yeah. And sometimes things work out because of it.
They do. I do. Yeah. I believe that. Yes.
Yeah. And then the other thing that you mentioned was, oh gosh, that's very loud. Let me turn that down because I'll scare myself out of my office. The other thing that you mentioned, Professor Wagner, is that you started as an intern and your supervising attorney was Matt, and then you eventually got hired by that firm as a staff attorney, or an associate, I should say. Yeah. And my pathway was similar with a nonprofit organization. And so I just want to point that out, because that is a viable route for some people, where you start in at a firm in a entry-level position. It may even be a non-legal position. It may be an administrative position. But you are basically demonstrating your value as you go. If you are bringing value to that organization, they're going to find a way to keep you there, right? They would much rather open up a position for you than have to hire someone new that they don't know their work ethic. They don't know if they're going to be punctual. They don't know if they're going to come to work dressed appropriately and be polite and all of those things. So I did the same thing. I interned and I became a fellow, and then a staff attorney, and then assistant director and counsel. And so, that's something to point out, I think, to those that are listening. So I'm going to move on and just ask you and be specific if you can. What do you really like about your job, and what aspect do you really not like? Obviously, I think it'd be rare to say this is a perfect job, but sometimes it's also just having your own practice. There's challenges in just having, a small law firm. So any area there that you want to tackle. Professor Loker, we'll start with you.
And Elizabeth often says that it's perfect here. So I know what she's going to say.
So we don't even have to go to her.
So, what's nice about it, again, is like we're doing exactly what we want to do, representing exactly who we want to represent, and bluntly, like getting paid well for it. So it's really checking off all the boxes for me, is that I'm satisfied and fulfilled on an academic and like legal level, and I can provide for my family. And, and that really is something that was a big focus for me.
Sure.
And, a good way to get a sense of that just is to, intern at places, just as Dean Baltodano said. Like, that's a very good way to get your foot in the door, see how the firm is run, and see if that's the type of place that you want to work. Because as you're interning or working somewhere, you're also interviewing your potential employer to see if that's a good fit for you. And we're doing the same when you're interning for us. So those are the two main, or like the main things that I enjoy. I hate email, but that's just going to follow us no matter where we go. So if you need to get a hold of me, please don't email me. Just like call me.
Oh, I'm so sorry. I think I've been.
You're fine. You're on the approved list.
I get a pass.
Yeah.
So, I have one question that's a little bit unrelated, but I'm just curious. Do you, as a contingency-based plaintiff side firm, do you operate from a line of credit? Do you have to, you had to do that? No,
we have a credit card, but, and that goes into, just like the case selection. We know what our ROI is per case. We know when we're signing a person up, what we plan to get from each of the defendants. So that's something I love about the analytics. Yeah. Sometimes I play too long with the analytics, and Elizabeth's like, we got to get some work done today. But I really like the charts and the graphs and those sorts of things.
So just for our audience, when you are running a plaintiff side contingency practice, you have to really always have something in the pipeline, right? You need to know that you're going to be settling cases along the way. I'm hoping your cases settle sooner than an employment law case would. And so you kind of have to have those things lined up. What some plaintiff side firms will have to do is rely on a line of credit from a bank, right? And they draw down from that line of credit until they get their big payout, and then they can pay the line of credit down. And, and that's very common when you're just starting out with practice as well. So that was my question. Professor Wagner, what do you love and not so much about what you're doing right now?
Yeah, what don't you like?
And plug your ear.
Hate working for Matt Loker. No, I don't enjoy written discovery. I really have to be hit over the head with a frying pan to get moving on that. I just don't enjoy that part.
I'm sorry to interrupt you. Can you just define what is written discovery?
Yes. So written discovery is in the fact-finding stage of the lawsuit. We get to, before you take depositions, which is the thing I love, you send written questions just asking for details pertaining to the violation your client is alleging. So you kind of get to dig into the defendant's information, but you ask them with typed questions. And I find that they're just like games. You don't get a lot of information out of them, but it is also one of the most important parts of the case. So you have to be good at it. Cases are won and lost in discovery, but I don't like doing written discovery. I like the action part, getting into the deposition, taking the documents and asking somebody about them. I don't like the act of reviewing them and figuring out on paper. So I don't like that paper part as much as the on your feet part, so to speak, as if that, and I also, and this is why Matt and I work great together too. I don't like doing intakes. So I don't like the part at the beginning with the client. I usually connect with my clients a little later on. But Matt loves doing intakes. So he's really good on that front end. And then I'm a little, compassionate in the middle of the case.
I stopped asking Elizabeth to do intakes. So like, I'm just gonna do all these.
Well, you know, and that's another important point is that, you know, we're all not going to love all aspects of legal practice, right? And so you don't want to land in a position where you're spending 75% of your day doing the thing that you don't like. That said, when you are a baby attorney, and particularly if you're going to work at a larger firm, you may be doing 75% of something you don't love, because that's part of the learning process, right? And so as long as you know that there's room for growth and you're not going to only be reviewing discovery 75% of every day, and you're eventually going to be able to do other things, then that's a good thing. But I think sometimes young attorneys kind of think that they're going to be able to do all aspects of a case, and it really depends on the place that you go to work for.
Absolutely.
You know, not likely if you're going to be at a big firm and you're the lowest on the totem pole, but certainly more likely that you'll be able to get exposure to all aspects of the case if you're at a small firm. Certainly if you're a solo practitioner, and also if you're in a nonprofit, you may also be handling the full case yourself, plus all of your administrative work and all that.
And I will also say that, you know, since this is a consumer law discussion, what I love about consumer law is we do get a really good balance of
Right.
If there's not one, like I do like my quiet office days, but I like my hectic court days as well. And it does have a balance. So we're not completely transactional or completely litigation. It's a good balance. So I like consumer law because we're a little bit of all the things there.
Yeah, no, I think that's really important too. And I think there are some attorneys who really want to be in the courtroom all the time, like, you know, triage, like in an emergency room. And so maybe crim law is right for you, right? And then there are those that would really just prefer to have quiet days at their desk. And it sounds like you've got a really nice balance. So I would like to ask you to think about when you were a law student. And you may have been thinking you were going to go a very different route, but if you could go back in time and maybe give yourself a message or some sort of advice, something that you might not have been aware of back then, something that worried you or caused anxiety back then, and now you're like, oh, if I had only known, whatever. So I'm curious if either of you have any thoughts or messages to your law student self. And who wants to start?
And aside from investing in Bitcoin, you know, I think like one of the best things to do as you're going through law school is intern everywhere. Different, and then like my students have heard this way too many times, different types of law firms. So try to get an internship on the government side, the defense side, the plaintiff side, big firm, small firm, contingency, hourly. Like there's so many different types of practices. You never ever know like what's going to be a passion. You know, Doug might like to work in like bird law. But, you know, there he is. I just have to comment on Doug. I haven't seen him in a while. So, you know, get exposure, because eventually when you pass the bar, you know, I don't want to say locked in because it's a negative thing, but like once you get knowledgeable on a particular aspect of the law, a lot of times like, people stick with that for the rest of their career. So you really want to know the total scope of the universe that's available to you, and just, you know, hone in on what really like resonates with you just academically. The money will follow. You really want to be satisfied with the subject matter before, you know, you have to sign on the line as the attorney.
Yeah. What about you, Professor Wagner?
I would tell myself to chill.
Yeah.
High stress law student. I did an internship every semester I could. I did not take advantage of the things about being in school that are nice about being in school. You know, you don't have class till 10, so you can sleep in a little. I didn't do that. I was up, I got to read for these, I got to brief this case, I've got to do this. I could have chilled a little bit more, I guess, to just put it kind of plainly. Relax a little bit, enjoy the process. It is an enjoyable process if you let it be. So not everything feels like it's the end of the world in law school. It's not. So that's what I would tell myself is, it's not the end of the world. Like, just relax. It'll all work out.
Because believe it or not, like, you do miss law school at a certain point. Like you look back and kind of like romanticize the whole process. And I like talk about it sometimes with my wife, like we were dating at the time, and talk about like how much fun it was. And she's like, what? Like, I was there when you were going through that. You did not have fun. But Like, there are certain things that you can enjoy, so try to like be present and enjoy some of it, because eventually you have the rest of the career ahead of you to think back to those days.
Wonderful, really good advice. So what I would like to do is open it up for questions. Does anybody have any questions that are specific to consumer law or anything that we have talked about tonight? Any topic that has come up? Any concerns that you might be having in law school in terms of the direction you're going, or anything at all?
I saw ends as kids on the roof, so I was kind of concerned about them. I'm gonna make sure they're okay.
That's just a standard day here. Yeah, that's normal.
Yeah.
I actually have a question.
Yeah, Dean Dowsett.
Dina, go
So
ahead.
what was it that drew you to consumer law? Other than you saw that there was a need at the firm that you were at, was there something that said, yes, this is my calling?
Yeah, I mean, Elizabeth, I haven't answered. Do you have something?
I do as well. It's really fulfilling helping people.
Yeah.
So we're doing something that most people don't take serious. If they're reporting you're a debt delinquent, there's not an easy number to put on that. But it's a very stressful part of your life if you can't get a student loan, if you can't get a car loan. So being able to come in and be very knowledgeable about how to help people with this, it satisfies, like Matt kind of already hit on it, it satisfies your purpose, but it's also great because it's a place we can make money. So we get to, funnel from both of those, in that we're helping people, and we also get to make money doing it. So it's kind of the best of both worlds, in that we don't have to sell our souls for anything. We really are helping people and fighting the good fight, but also being able to take care of ourselves and our lives while doing it.
So doing well by doing good is what
Exactly.
we like to say. What about you, Professor Loker?
It's the same sort of thing, because mostly, like, almost every single time, like, all of our clients are coming to us at the lowest point of their lives. They're suddenly the victim of identity theft. They've lost sometimes hundreds of thousands of dollars, and they just don't know what to do, because they're going and disputing with the banks or the credit bureaus, and they just get these form letters back that mean absolutely nothing, don't take into account like anything of their circumstances. So then, they find us, and I can always feel that like sigh of relief, like the weight coming off their shoulders when they see that, like, this is all we do, this is what we focus on, and there is going to be an end in sight where we can help them take back control of their life, and we're not going to charge them, tens or hundreds of thousands of dollars on top of the money or whatever they already lost. So that just is very, fulfilling, and just it really gets me going every day. And Enz, you got a follow-up question?
Yeah, you had mentioned something earlier. Well, obviously you said you do all the intakes, but
Yeah.
What are the things, besides obviously the fact of the case that you think are triable, what are the things you look at in potential clients when you're doing those intakes?
Yeah, exactly. So in terms of the intakes, it's kind of multifaceted, in the sense that, number one, we, have to want to work together. We have to like each other on a certain level, because when we're going through, I need them to trust myself and trust Elizabeth, like, right off the bat. We need them to really open up to us about incredibly personal things that happened during the worst point of their lives. So we need to be able to have that rapport right off the bat. And in terms of like us trusting them, sometimes, certain consumers know that if they say something is fraud, they can get out of legitimate debts. So, we're also kind of testing them and making sure they actually are the victim of fraud, as opposed to someone who's just trying to, get away with something. So that's one level where I'm testing them and making sure we can be friendly and get along. Beyond that, something that what we're looking for would be some sort of concrete damages. Frankly, we have too many, we get more intakes than we can handle. So we're only taking, frankly, like the best of the best, and referring out some of the others to, less busy firms.
Yeah.
So we want to see damages. We want a story that we can present to a jury. We have lots of stories that we could tell that could be fun, if we have time later. So that's what we're looking for. Do we like each other? Can we make money together? Do you have a story that will resonate with the judge or the jury? Those are the things I'm looking for.
Yeah. Because you have to be able to trust your client as much as they need to trust you, because if you need a response to some document or you need something signed, you need to be able to track them down and know that they're going to respond. And
Absolutely.
and you said the word test, which is that was going to be my next question. You know, is there some sort of testing that you do to kind of determine? And you know, and there's nothing wrong with taking those smaller cases, and now those are the cases that you then refer out to the new attorneys, right? The newer attorneys that they're eager, they're willing to take the small cases, and that's really and there's some firms that's where they just land, right? They just like the small cases, but so there's enough work to go around, it sounds like.
Too much.
Yeah. Let's see.
Everybody.
Amanda had a question.
Yep. Professor Loker, I had a question about how do you handle it when a client doesn't agree with your strategy, or when you're close to, you know, in my mind, it's like a triggering event, right? Like everything is fine until you get down to, like, I imagine, like numbers or exact negotiations. And how do you handle it when a client just knows a friend of a friend who has a better idea than what you're suggesting or recommending? It seems really sticky. Do you explain the complicated law? Like, how do you handle that?
It goes back to the intake and developing that trust, and, you know, really being the expert in the field. But we do get pushback. You know, most of the time the clients go with us. You know, I say maybe they went to the Google School of Law and they find some semi-related verdict from somewhere within the world that they think lines up with their case. And it's, you know, you have to realize that a lot of our clients are first-time litigants, and when they're bringing up those sorts of things that bear no relation, you just have to break it down and, you know, have the time to talk to them about it. But most of them, you know, do trust us because we develop that trust, and we can talk to them about that. Because talking about money, you know, when we're breaking down, you know, if you accept this amount of money, you will receive this portion. A lot of times, you know, that can be life-changing money for people. Like, we send a check to a client for $550,000, and, you know, once those sorts of numbers start coming out, you know, things can change. So if you don't have that trust, that foundation from the beginning, it can go very, very south very, very quickly, and you can have a bar complaint on your hands. But luckily, we don't really deal with that much.
So, you know,
sorry, go ahead.
Yeah. So, yeah, I was just going to say that, you know, when you have a client that is going to get a settlement of that size, let's say, and this may be the most money they've ever seen in their entire life, do you help them further? Do you recommend, you know, a CPA, or recommend a financial planner or someone to help them manage that money? Or do you is that the end of it for you? I'm just curious.
Yeah,
I mean, you're not required to, but.
Yeah, we don't want to give tax advice.
Yeah.
So big and small settlements, you know, we say before, you know, talk to your accountant, talk to your CPA, get a sense of what your taxable liability will be, because that's a gray area in the law.
Yeah.
You know, with some of like the larger ones, especially like we have a minor who got quite a bit of money. You know, wanted to make sure that he connected with someone for financial planning, because his identity was stolen when he was 10. So you know, that was a nasty case.
Elizabeth, or Professor Wagner, sorry.
Yeah, so I was going to go back to Amanda's question. I was going to use the phrase "the squeaky wheel gets the grease" with the clients, in that when they are like that, that's not just an off the fly conversation. So the way that it's best handled is usually to have two attorneys in the room, if you have two attorneys. Because even if it's, Matt can do this with me too, bring someone else in to say the exact same thing, but they hear it from a different voice, and they're all of a sudden, oh yeah, you're right. And so that's one way we do approach it. Having two attorneys in the room and having someone else say it, maybe they say it just a slightly different way too, that pitches it in a way where we get the people to be, we're a team, so it creates that team environment a little bit. So that's something that we've found has been really effective when we have those difficult clients.
I'm going to ask a question that might be controversial, but I want to keep it real. So do you, being a male-female law firm, right, partnership or collaboration there, do you run into any gender dynamics with clients?
Yes, Elizabeth. No, that absolutely happens. And having that tag team approach is very helpful. And like there's one client in particular who like we're having a conversation and we could tell there's something more that she wanted to say. And immediately after I leave the room, she was able to open up to Elizabeth in a very positive way about certain facts in her case that she wasn't comfortable talking to me about. So that's a massive consideration in a number of ways. Sometimes it's a negative thing where we have those gender dynamics, like it's being it just comes, I'm trying to think how to phrase it, where they don't like one of us or the other because of a gender type thing. But it's been very positive to have both of us here.
Yeah, it's kind of just a reality, a dynamic to keep in
Yes.
mind when you are in a business relationship. Any other questions? I don't know if I see any other pretend hands up. Yellow hands. No.
I mean, I would say as you're going forward, Rig, go ahead.
Oh yeah, go ahead, Michaela.
That joke never gets old.
Never. It's the stamp of approval. That's how I see it.
Yes.
Okay, so we talked about pivoting careers a little bit at the beginning too, especially at the beginning stages where we haven't really found our footing yet.
Mhm.
So that is something that I'm heavily considering too, because I feel like the bar is nearing, and I haven't felt that since.
It's
So
super close, yeah.
knowing that the beginning of my career is sooner than expected, right? Isn't that always true?
Yes.
When do you feel like you need to acknowledge when a pivot is coming, and when would you give yourself that time and grace to allow that pivot and to move? Because maybe you're just new. Maybe this is foreign still and it just doesn't feel as natural as it will, right? So when would you decipher between those feelings?
Yeah, Elizabeth.
So I'll jump in on this one because I think it really depends on who you are as a person. But no matter what, when you're new, those changes are frightening because you are in a closed universe right now. So getting outside of your bubble, it feels scary. But I'm here to tell you, I switched jobs to a totally different area and I hated it. I did 3 months and I quit, and then got back into something I love. And so I took the jump. It didn't work out. I landed somewhere fantastic. So I say, if you're feeling the pivot, make the pivot, because at least you'll know. It's one thing you'll know what you don't want to do. So at the very end, there's a positive to be got out of it. And there are plenty of jobs out there for attorneys. And I know the market rises and falls, but if you are flexible and you are smart, you'll land on your feet. So just take that dive, take that pivot. Don't let someone convince you that's all the universe is, and get out there and try those different things.
Yeah, I think that's
Thank
good
you.
advice.
Really
And
reassuring.
if you find yourself in an area of law that you're really not liking, you're dreading going to work every day. You've given it a good try. It's better to move on sooner than later, because you don't want to get boxed into that area of law for the long term, right? Because when the next firm is hiring in a subject area that does interest you, but you have 5 years of some other area of law experience, you may not be the top candidate for that opportunity. So good to think about. And all the more reason to dabble in as many areas of law as you can when you're a law student. It's kind of like dating, right? Like you can learn what you don't want as much as you learn what you do want, and by ruling things out, right? So you can do that internship with the DA's office and say, nope, criminal law is definitely not for me. Or maybe you would say, I kind of like criminal law, but I really would like to see what it's like at the public defender's office, and then you can narrow things down.
Which is very much to a point that Elizabeth made earlier, is like there's certain areas of the law where like you're always in court or you're always transactional, which means like you're just exchanging the paperwork and the emails. So I feel like there's certain personality types that are just more natural for a specific area of the law. So, finding something that fits for you is going to be helpful. So like I liked the balance of, being in court more often than a lot of areas of the law, but not every single day like a criminal defense attorney. So it takes some time to just think about, where you want to spend your days. Like, I know I don't want to be here every single day, just as a computer zombie, like typing away on my computer. But some days I do just want to hang out and be at the office. So it varies for us, which is nice.
One last question. Are there any professional associations for consumer law attorneys that law students could snoop around? Maybe they have a website they can snoop around. Maybe they even have conferences or seminars that they can join or attend just to kind of get another sense of what the professional world is like in this practice area.
Yeah, absolutely. So we are in the National Association of Consumer Advocates. I'm on the board for that. And we are making a big push as an organization to, present what we do to law students, because, we see a real problem with a lack of understanding if there are consumer attorneys like us that do what we do. Keeping in mind that consumer law is very broad, like we're a niche of a niche, but there is a big push through NACA to get involved. And then like each kind of subset of consumer law and other areas of the law will have their own organizations as well. So getting involved with those organizations, like they love law students. So, figure out what you're interested in and we can facilitate a NACA connection as well.
Awesome. All right. Unless there are any final questions, I really want
I have to say, I saw a lot of Loker Law swag.
Yeah.
Can we say that this session has been sponsored by Loker Law?
You may. Look at that. We got a big new sticker on our window. So, just throwing it out there. Like anything I kind of want, I was like, oh, let's put a logo on that. And like run through the firm. Haley, it doesn't count. I didn't see you use your mug. But, one of the things I want to make sure that everyone understands is that, we have a lot of recent bar passers from SLO. And one of them reached out to me when did results come out, like last week or so. And they're asking me like, what sort of salary should I be looking for? And, he said that maybe $60,000 or $70,000 felt reasonable. And I was like, okay, well, $60,000 or $70,000 was reasonable 12 years ago when I passed. So we talked about the market, and Tuesday of this week, he signed, he said I could talk about it. I asked him, he signed a contract for $90,000. So when you're going out and practicing, like signing on to become an attorney, don't sell yourself short, know the market, know what you want to do, and know that you have the degree. You're on equal footing with everyone else that has the degree, and make sure you demand like what you're entitled to. By the time
and I don't want to kick the hive a little bit, but as women too, we're taught to not ask about salary. And I'm always opening myself up to have a very, very blunt conversation about money with anybody in our industry, because we didn't know we weren't making as much as the male dollar because of that sort of secrecy that came with salary. So get out there and talk to people and ask them the awkward questions. And at least I know myself and Matt will give you the honest answers.
Yep. Exactly.
And do your homework too, because it's different and different areas of law are different, right? So you have to know what you're walking into in terms of the area of law. All really, really good advice. I want to just thank Professors Wagner and Loker for their time tonight and for suggesting this topic area for us to discuss, and to all of you for your really excellent questions. And I think we had a really nice discussion here. I do want to just make a little bit of a plug for, we've got this Exploring Careers in the Law series, which is delving into substantive areas of law, but starting in next semester. So that would be, what is that, fall semester, spring, or spring? What's next semester? Where are we?
August, whatever.
Yeah. Next semester, I'm going to launch a new speaker series that will focus on not substantive areas of law, but more of the aspects of law, of practicing law that we don't talk too much about in law school. And our first speaker is going to be on what is imposter syndrome? What does every law student need to know about imposter syndrome? And so stay tuned for that. We're going to keep mixing it up and doing substantive area, careers in law, and then some of this other stuff as well. So I look forward to seeing you at our next, and we'll have other careers in the law facilitated by other deans as well. So look forward to that.